1879, Thomas Edison invented the first incandescent light bulb. While it was a venerable invention at the time, it is now one of the greatest sources of energy waste. On campus, it is the lighted empty classroom, an uninhabited dorm room, a vacated restroom, abandoned hallways, and 24-hour security lights. Light pollution is a prevailing element of our daily life, but what is the real price we pay for an artificial light?
Many Westminster students are aware of the problems with light usage on campus and are concerned with the damage it's causing to the world. These students would like to see some improvement.
I think the security lights in the hallways need to be turned off.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we don't need, all of them on.
Just one.
Just maybe one. Just for safety precautions, we need to stay
one,
safe.
not 18.
I think we could probably cut down on them a bit.
Yeah?
Turn them off
Yeah.
when necessary. We keep our lights on, if you notice, half on, half off. We are not a full blast of lights all the time.
Yeah, if you go out at night, like out in the street, you can see all the lights that are left on. It'll be like 3 in the morning, like even in the basement, the laundry room light's on, this one's always on, the one upstairs.
And our emergency light is taped so the button is always on.
What happens if you untape it?
It turns off. But somehow it always gets retaped.
Reckless. It's reckless.
It's bullshit. Like I wake up at night and it's just like light outside. I'm like,
everywhere.
It's 4 in the morning.
Completely unnecessary.
Bullshit.
It's bullshit. What about in your rooms? You guys turn your lights off all the time? Before I leave? Even when I'm in the room?
Yeah, I usually have my little night light. I turn everything else off.
No lights?
No lights.
No lights. Do you think that's a good idea?
We usually like the lights up.
Blinded by the lights, wrapped up like a douche, another runner in the night. Blinded by the lights, wrapped up like a douche, another runner in the night. Blinded by the lights, wrapped up like a douche.
Some Westminster students don't see any problem with the light usage on campus, and some feel that the overuse of electricity is justified.
Security lights have to be on. The bathroom lights I always turn off, and they are probably on more than they should be. The hall lights, that when you turn the light switch off, those don't go off, those have to stay on for security issues.
For safety, there's people that fall down those stairs.
In broad daylight?
Yep, you should turn them off and see how dark those stairs get. 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
I think we need 2. I think we need one there and one there.
Do you think we tend to waste our lights, though? Leave them on when we're not supposed to?
No.
Yes.
How do you think about that?
I think you're right.
What do you think we should do?
We should probably... I liked his idea of getting 2 lights.
Maybe 4 lights.
I think that there are not enough lights on. I like to be welcomed when I walk into my room by the bright, warm light. And I turn up the heater before I leave, too. So it feels like a nice cabin in the mountains.
Do you think there's any disadvantages to that kind of lifestyle?
Living in a cabin? We're wasting electricity.
But it's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
You've ever noticed too many lights on when they shouldn't be?
I have noticed that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's pretty okay. I mean, we need to see.
Blinded by the lights, wrapped up like a douche, another runner in the night. Blinded by the lights.
Our efforts have become even more important since regulation reform efforts on national and state levels have failed repeatedly. Initiatives such as Congress's American Clean Energy and Security Act have been needed by industry.
Madman drums, rumbles, engines in the summer with the teenage diplomat. In the dumps with the mumps as the adolescent pumps his way into his hat. With a boulder on my shoulder, feeling kinda older, I trip the merry-go-round. With its very unpleasing, sneezing and wheezing.
What is Westminster currently doing to reduce energy consumption on campus?
How long do you have? Westminster's been working really over the past decade to reduce energy consumption, even at the same time that we've been growing in terms of square footage and population, right? So between 2008 and 2009, we actually reduced our total energy use by about 6%, while we had more people and more square footage than we ever had before. So that comes from a lot of different things, upgrading our heating and cooling equipment, educating people about turning off their computers and not wasting electricity, and also things like lighting retrofits. You guys are talking about lighting stuff. We have upgraded, I think, between 90 and 95% of the lighting on our campus to be significantly more efficient.
Awesome. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. As you guys know, this is the largest freshman class Westminster's ever had, so.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to impact us nearly as much as bringing Meldrum online. Okay. Meldrum's our second biggest building on campus, and so that's a lot of additional energy use that's coming online with that as well.
What role do you or the Environmental Center as a whole play in this effort?
As far as lighting goes, we've been involved in several ways over the years, from working with students to do lighting inventories, right, going through buildings at night and determining where lights are left on, where they could be shut down. Also doing student projects going through and measuring light levels, right, to see which spaces on campus are overlit or underlit, because if they're overlit, there's a potential for energy savings as you bring that lighting level down. We also, the Environmental Center, we're responsible for measuring and tracking and reporting on all of our energy consumption on campus. So electricity is about 50% of our total greenhouse gas emissions that we're responsible for at Westminster. And so we're very interested in tracking that and bringing that down as much as possible. So we really, working with facilities, working with students, working with architects on new buildings, really try and be the driving force behind energy efficiency and renewable energy on campus as well.
Awesome. What alternative power sources does the campus already employ, and where? What are some of the ways Westminster plans to become carbon neutral in the years to come?
So what we've outlined in our climate neutrality plan that was adopted by the college earlier this year is some very strategic, very concrete ways to reduce our consumption about 15% over the next 5 years. And I'd encourage anybody to go online to the Environmental Center's website, click on climate neutrality, and you can read the whole 40-page plan. But basically it has to do with upgrading some of the HVAC, heating and cooling equipment on our campus. It has to do with education, all those things that I listed before. It has to do with reducing the number of people driving alone to campus, right? Another big source for us is commuters. So there's a bunch of stuff. So you asked me about energy sources, not energy savings, right? So there's two different things there. Okay. Energy efficiency is using less, right? And we've made a pledge to get to climate neutrality, right, by 2030. No net greenhouse gas emissions. And you do that by either not using the energy or producing it from renewable sources. So on the renewable sources side, which is what was at the beginning of that question, the first step that we took as a college was in 2006, when we became a visionary partner with Rocky Mountain Power's Blue Sky program, getting about 11% of our electricity used on campus from renewable sources like wind and solar, off-site, someplace else, right? That was a result of a student proposal, by the way. And then in 2007, we brought on our first solar electricity generation on campus. That's on top of health and wellness. Meldrum was our second, with a significantly larger system, and we actually just received more funding from Rocky Mountain Power to do our third, which will be on the Jewett Center.
What are some of the ways Westminster plans to become carbon neutral in the years to come?
So what we've outlined in our climate neutrality plan that was adopted by the college earlier this year is some very strategic, very concrete ways to reduce our consumption about 15% over the next 5 years. And I'd encourage anybody to go online to the Environmental Center's website, click on climate neutrality, and you can read the whole 40-page plan. But basically it has to do with upgrading some of the HVAC, heating and cooling equipment on our campus. It has to do with education, all those things that I listed before. It has to do with reducing the number of people driving alone to campus, right? Another big source for us is commuters. So there's a bunch of stuff. The next phase will be looking at even more things we can do to increase our efficiency, produce as much electricity as we can from renewable sources, and then at some point we start looking at offsets or renewable energy credits, basically keeping carbon out of the atmosphere elsewhere, not just on our campus.
You had mentioned that like all the residential halls had been like converted to solar, or I mean not solar, I mean fluorescent.
Most of them, yeah. So that's been a project over the past 5 years. The last things remaining were the vanity lights, and I think one of the res halls still has those vanity lights to be converted. Other than that, most of the conversions happened already.
And how much energy is that saving?
I couldn't tell you. I'd have to count fixtures. Fluorescents are exponentially more energy efficient than the regular incandescent light bulbs. But even within fluorescent technology, there's old fluorescent technology and new fluorescent technology, and the new stuff is much more efficient than the old stuff. So, you know, for just regular twister bulbs, I'm trying to remember, but it's something like they use about 10% of the energy. I'd have to look back at those figures.
And like the fluorescents in the safety, or in the like the hall lights and the safety lights, are those all fluorescent as well?
Yeah, some of them, but some of them may be LED lights, which are even more efficient than fluorescents. So for example, all the exit signs on campus used to be old incandescent lights, and they're now LEDs, so we've been changing those out over the years as well.
And like how much more expensive are LED than fluorescent?
I'd have to look. We actually had a student do a study on LED exit lights to run sort of the comparison and what it would cost us to upgrade those. I'd have to look back at those figures. It's been a couple of years since she did that. LED, just regular lights, to like retrofit these kind of lights with LEDs would be very, very expensive. Probably at this point where the technology is not worth that investment for campus, right? Your savings isn't great enough to justify the really high expense. It's just a new technology, so it's expensive.
In the larger political world, conservation of light usage, along with other environmental movements, may not always take first priority. This doesn't mean that the people of our country are powerless to improve this situation. Sometimes efforts are more successful on a small scale because it's easier to motivate a small number of people to take action. Westminster is a perfect environment for this kind of motivation. Though there's a lot of room for improvement, we're already taking some action against this wasteful energy usage.
If they allowed us candles, we could save a lot of energy.
And incense.
And incense.
I think maybe like strings of smaller lights.
Okay.
Use less power. Or just get like solar panels.
Well, you could have some motion sensor lights, like in the common room and in the hallways, because those don't need to be on all the time.
Maybe signs near the light switch, you know, that's always good.